You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. And finally, our third sponsor is 988. The Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is a direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. That's 988oklahoma.com. And now, let's get into today's episode. Let's give a warm welcome to my guest. Last year he was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, artist Mr. Harvey Pratt. Thank you so much for coming down.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm glad to do this.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, we just chatted a little bit before. My wife is also a tribe member, part of the tribe of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and you know her family very well. They're all artists, and I know you kind of run in the same. The art world is such a small world, right? Especially in the tribal arts. And Brent, I think you know very well, is one of her uncles and is very good at it and speaks extremely highly of you as well and your artwork. So I have heard about you before you were inducted.
Johnny, we visit with Johnny quite a bit.
Yeah. It's great for me to get that education from my wife's side of the family, because growing up in the UK, we didn't have, a Native American history class, right? Whereas I get to learn all these things from my wife, and even today we've been catching up on the TV show Reservation Dogs, and I'm like, is that real? Does this happen? And she's like, oh no, this is a thing. And the owls was the owl was the first thing I caught on to, and I wish more people got to know that, and I'm fortunate enough that my wife is Native American. I get to learn this stuff, and sadly, people aren't as fortunate.
Well,
but
not all tribes see the owl the same way,
Yeah, but it's it's just fascinating to me that history is one of the greatest things ever. And
I agree with that. I loved history, and I love history now. We belong to a historical group that we visit once a month, and they have guest speakers in it. They talk about the history of, but I heard that they were cutting the Oklahoma history classes in the curriculum, cutting it in half.
Yeah,
that's too bad. I hate that.
Yeah, it's sad. It's
history
really sad.
And Oklahoma history, they're cutting them all in half. Mm-hmm. That's we need to learn from history.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And to the point, I know we have the exhibit that's coming about the Battle of Washita upstairs, the massacre of a Washita, which you're very involved in. That's coming, and it is, I think in today's world, it is a little bit, people might see it as a hard topic to get over and very hard to experience. But it's history, and we have to teach it, and there's so much to learn from that, rather than not talking about it.
Sometimes history can be one-sided, just one side. The winners tell the story, and the losers don't get to tell their story in history. And we see that still happening, that they try to alter history a little bit.
Yeah.
Protect a certain group of people, then alter the history a little bit. That's kind of, we've experienced some of those things, said you're not telling history correctly.
So you're predominantly known as an artist. You've spent, 50 years doing the artwork for mostly for the law enforcement, right? So
yes. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I got into law enforcement almost immediately, and I've been very fortunate to have been around a lot of really dedicated people and honest, hardworking, and. So you kind of fall into that group, you become that way. Being around decent people, decent, hardworking, honest people, and and so you stay in that same realm. And I got out when I got out of the Marine Corps and got into law enforcement, and I did my first forensic drawing there on a homicide, and they had the captain saw me drawing one time, and then I had a little article in the paper, and he said, this homicide, he said, one of the victims is still alive. He said, can you go over there and draw the man that shot her? And I said, sure. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never experienced that before, but so I went over there and did the drawing, and we caught the guy based on my first drawing. And probably if I had not been successful that very first time, there's a good chance I never would have done it again. But since then, I've done over 5,000 drawings in my career in law enforcement. And I was the first, after I retired the first time from OSBI as an assistant director, I was still doing the art all that time, and we went to a hearing at the state capitol for appropriations, and the director said, well, Harvey's getting ready to retire. And one of the senators said, well, who's going to do what he does? And they said, well, we don't have anybody. And they said, what are you going to do, Harvey? And I said, well, I've got about 10 offers from different states that want me to come work for them in the forensics. And the senator said, well, we're in the business of making laws. He said, let's just make a law for you to become the state forensic artist. Would that be okay? And I said, sure. I said, I didn't want to leave. I'd stay here. And they just put me on another retirement system. So, I ended up drawing 2 retirements, one in law enforcement, one is in a civilian capacity. And I stayed at OSBI until 2017 when I retired again. And I still get calls from people wanting me to do things, and I'm so busy right now, I just have a hard time breaking away to go do something. And then when I did do that, I ended up in court, and it just ties your time up, and that you don't get compensated for it, so. But yeah, I've had a great career. The Creator has really been good to me, and He gave me a beautiful wife and hard work, and she does all the hard work for me. Does all the promotions, everything on the computer, and I'm just really fortunate.
Yeah, you're the typical artist, right? You just want to do what you do, and you like doing what you do, and all that other stuff you'd rather pass to somebody. Yeah,
I got paint on my hands.
Paint on you, yes, exactly.
I got up this morning and started painting. And I just now saw that shoulder. I said, but I got paint on all of my clothes.
Yeah, of course.
I'd come home from work and I'd sit down, start painting. The next thing you know, I'd have it on my cuffs, on my pants, and she said, "Go put an apron on."
So obviously, art is a huge part of your life. How does it begin? Do you see family painting? Like, is it? How does art come into your life as a young child?
I think I became really interested in art when my first grade teacher, and I always remember her, Mrs. Jones, she said, "Well, Harvey, you've got a little talent," because we were drawing things, and she complimented me, and children they don't know if they have talent till someone tells them.
Right.
You just assume that, well, everybody can do this. I can do it. They can do it, but not everybody can do certain things. So she told me that, and then Mrs. Wyatt said this in the third grade. She said the same thing. And then my older brother's an artist, so he was in school. As I followed the 3 grades behind him, they would say, "Is Charles Pratt your brother? Can you draw like him?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I can."
Yeah.
So I was inspired by those teachers and by my brother. And then when I got into high school, I went to St. Patrick's Indian Mission in Anadarko, and we just lived there. And I got to see some of the Kiowa 5 art that they had in that building up in the attic, and I got to look at a bunch of art and got involved. And we didn't have an art class. And the priest saw me drawing one day, and he said, "Harvey," he said, that's pretty good. You're pretty talented. He said, let's buy you some supplies. And he bought me some art supplies. He bought me my first paintbrush and watercolors and paper and stuff like that. And I painted a crucifixion and made everybody Indians. And so I'm a junior in high school, and I sold it for $90. And I thought, holy crap, I can make some money doing this, you know. So when you have some success, you know, it inspires you, and people inspire you, and that's kind of how that all evolved. I got in the Marine Corps, and I did some stuff for the Marine Corps. Did some drawings for them. So I just kind of stayed in that vein and continued to draw and paint through law enforcement, and got in some galleries, you know. So it was. I got to look at a lot of different kind of art. I started off drawing flat art, just that flat, non-dimensional, like an old-time Indian artist, and then I did ledger work, and I just kind of expanded into several things, and I started doing some terracotta stuff and firing terracotta. And then I got into bronzes. Mm-hmm. Then I got into wood carving, and so I just experimented with a lot of things that were really good for me, allowed me to reach out and kind of be creative in a lot of different areas. And I'm very fortunate in that I was able to do all those different types of art. And I designed the Oklahoma Centennial blanket, Pendleton blanket. I designed that. I designed the National Native American Veterans Pendleton blanket. You know, so I've just really got into a lot of different things in a lot of ways. You know, and which kept me being creative and just allowed me to have some success in a lot of different areas.
It's amazing when you're a child, it's amazing that one teacher, you know, Mrs. Jones and then Mrs. Wyatt, just that reinforces that you're good at something, and then, you know, your priest just happens to see you doing something and said, well, I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to buy you art supplies. Like these little moments, right? Yeah. They seem so small at the time. And it's probably a teacher's thing that they tell kids, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. But, you know, when you look back at your story and you're like, that's continued to reinforce the fact that I was good at this. And then when you sell that painting for $90, you're a junior and you're like, I can do this for the rest of my life, right? That paves the way.
I can make some money for the rest of my life just being an artist. Yeah. And, you know, my brothers told me, Charles, he's a famous sculptor and jeweler and painter, and he lived in Italy for a year learning about stones, how to carve stones and the types of stones. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he said, Harvey, he said, even when you were a little boy, he said, you could draw people that looked like the real person. He said, you had that knack about you. He said, and I thought, well, I never even knew that. Yeah. You know, I didn't know that. I draw somebody. He said, you make a drawing. He said, it looks like who you're. So I guess that kind of came natural for me. You know, when I was born, I wasn't born Harvey Pratt. I was born Vihunskis, which is a Cheyenne word, means he wants to be a chief. He's going to be a chief. Okay. And they named me that because I was a veil baby. You know, I had that membrane on me, and I was born in a little house. Not in a hospital, and all my mother's aunts were there. And those old women, when they saw me like that, he said, "Oh, look at him. He wants to be a chief." See, so they must have seen that somewhere in their past, that somebody was born like that and became somebody. And so they gave me that name. I kept that name for a long time. Even normally when you come back from the military, back from war, that they could change your name, and I didn't change my name. I kept that, and I was going to join one of the Cheyenne military societies, the dog soldiers, and so I started contacting those headsmen, and they were talking to me, and then all of a sudden the chiefs came. The chiefs just came in and they said, "Harvey, we want you to join the Chiefs Lodge." You know, and I said, "Well, that's my name." I said, "That's my name. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that, but I have to change my name." And I said, because it took me 2 years. Gene and I went through this process to get into that Chiefs Society, and I had said, I'll change my name. And I said, I'm going to take White Thunder's name. It's my great-great-grandfather. I'm going to take his name so that I won't dishonor it. I'll always keep in mind of him, and I won't dishonor his name. And I think, to me, that was something that was important to me, to help me to stay on without stepping down, falling down, doing something wrong, you know. And so I took his name, and I always think about that, in the mornings. I say, well, today is the day I need to be better than I was yesterday. Yeah. Be a better man today than I was yesterday. So, and that's just some of the things that the Chiefs talk about, and different people talk about those things. And like I said, I've just really been fortunate to be around a lot of dedicated people that constantly lift you up, Yeah. And so to me, that was really important to me, that to be around people and not dishonor them in law enforcement, and not dishonor the people and the Cheyenne Chiefs, not dishonor my wife, and just right. So just things like that.
Constant reminder of the daily reminder that I can do better, and I should do better than I was yesterday.
Yeah,
it's empowering. It's super impactful, and it's a simple thing to have, right? It's very easy to have that, and a lot of people don't have that.
That's right.
And it's such a simple thing to wake up every day and think, this is going to constant reminder, right? It's like writing on your mirror when you brush your teeth in the morning, just having a note there that says 1% better every day, just something simple, but we don't do that, sadly. I wish we did.
Gina and I have a sticky note on the mirror in the bathroom. It has a heart on it, has her initials, and I have a heart with my initials on it. It's been there for 8 years. We just leave it there. Those little sticky notes are there on the mirror. With two little hearts with our initials on them. And it's just something that was spontaneous, but it means something to me every time I go in there and I see it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think there's things that you have to kind of lift you up and remind you of who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. How'd you guys meet?
In law enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, my wife was an able agent, alcohol, tobacco, and gaming, and she retired. We retired just a month apart.
Amazing.
So we've been together since the early 90s.
Yeah. Almost 30 years, right? Yeah. I only know that because I'm 32. I'm terrible at math, but I know when I was born. I know how old I am now. Oh, brilliant. You mentioned the Marine Corps. What leads you to going into the Marine Corps, and then how was your time there?
Well, honestly, Indian people have a great respect for their veterans. Mm-hmm. They always honor their veterans. Even a little boy, we would go somewhere and Mom would say, go shake his hand, And so I always admired veterans in the military. Mm-hmm. And my uncle, Charles, was a Marine in the Second World War and in Korea. And he was still in during Vietnam. And so he would, when I went to the West Coast, he came to the training center when I was still in boot camp, and he came here to see me. And there was another Pratt in there, and they brought him out, and my uncle said, "That's not my nephew. Get this guy out of here. He's a guy. Run him out." And me and RD we went through boot camp. We went to the military police together. We went to Vietnam together with the recon unit. Mm-hmm. And so we're really close, and we stayed close until he passed away about a year ago. And my uncle, I always admired him, and the family always talked about him, and that he was a Marine Raider in the Second World War, and just had the greatest respect for him. And he, when I got out and was coming home, I went to see him before I came back to Oklahoma. And he said, let's go eat a steak at the slop shoot, what they call a slop shoot. Let's go eat. So we went over there and we sat down, and he was talking, and a sergeant major came down, and he sat down with was friends with my uncle, My uncle had ribbons like this all the way up to his shoulder, And then pretty soon another, I think he was a first sergeant, came and sat down. And they just kind of ignored me. I was a lance corporal. They just ignored me, and they were all talking and laughing. And people would come by and throw money on the table. Or they'd come by and they'd put a drink on the table, you know? And damn, the table's just full of $5 bills, you know? And finally one of them said, asked about me, and my uncle said, well, he said, he just came out of Vietnam with a recon unit. He was there with a recon unit guarding the base and picking up shot down pilots. Picked up a lot of pilots. They were shooting down a lot of helicopters and a lot of spotter planes, and one of them asked me. He said, "Oh no! First off, they got up and you know, and they was walking around shaking hands with everybody. And I said something to my uncle, and he said, "They're Congressional Medal of Honor winners. That's what they're putting that money down for. All these Marines are throwing money on their table." He said, "They're both of them are Congressional Medal of Honor winners." And I said, holy smokes, you know?
Yeah.
And I, to this day, I can't remember their names. I was so stunned to sit there. And when they came back down and sat down, and one of them said, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm trying to catch a hop, which is a hop on an airplane to go home. And he said, you be at the base at 6 o'clock in the morning. He said, well, I'll put you on a plane. My uncle said, all right, you know? So, when I went to the base, they put me on the commandant's airplane. The commandant of the United States Marine Corps, they put me on his plane. And I'm sitting there, and it's a little prop job. You know, it's not a big fancy jet, it's a prop job. Of course, this is in 65. And all these officers are running around, and I don't think I even moved a muscle till they landed in Dallas, Texas to let me off. I mean, they made a special stop in Dallas, Texas to let me off. And I thought, man, those Congressional Medal of Honor winners have a lot of stroke, you know? They have, when they ask somebody to do something, people just do it for them. And so that's how I came home. And I always remembered that, you know, and I said, I'm sorry I don't remember those two guys' names, because I would love to have read about their exploits and what they've done.
Yeah.
Two Marine guys, you know? And my uncle was friends with all these guys. You know, he knew all them old timers, you know, World War II guys. And he was missing in action twice. And he's the reason I joined the Marine Corps, because of him.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. As reasons go to join the Marine Corps, having someone like that in your life to look up to and follow, and all the, you know, I'm not surprised when you said that my family looked up to him because of the, you know, it's empowering.
I've got his picture. We've got his picture and his wife in a bedroom.
Yeah.
You know, all these years, it hung on the wall at our house in El Reno, hung on the wall there, and I don't even know how I got it, but I got it.
Yeah.
And it's just really, you know, he's always been special to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that is really special to have that, and to have, you know, those memories. And, you know, sorry to hear that he passed in the recently, but that's special, you know, to have that, to have someone so close to you and also have a similar thing to do, right? You know, there's a lot of people out there who don't get to go into business or don't get to go and do the same things that their family members did. And, you know, you and a select few of people get that experience, and you get to learn and be around them. But the special part is you also get to see them around their friends, and you get to see how much respect their friends have for your uncle. Exactly. And that's the special part, right? Is you get to see them be themselves and not look up to them as a parent, but you look up to, or as a family member, you get to look up to that person as, you know, we're in the Marine Corps together, and this guy has so much respect from his other fellow. That's special. That's really special. Yeah,
you know, what I think about it is that, you know, I was raised by people that were born in the 1870s. Mm-hmm. You know, they were. My mother was born in 1911, and she grew up with all of those old Indians, and, you know, and then my grandfather and my Aunt Laura, all those old. I remember all those old women.
Yeah.
You know, there were very few old men, but all these old women were all together, and they were always sitting around telling stories and smoking cigarettes. You know, And some of them old ladies had tattoos, you know, they had tattoos on their face or on their hand, and they would just tell a lot of old stories. So I got to hear a lot of old stories about people, you know, and some of the things that they legends, and so that always kind of inspired me, you know. And I said, well, I want to know about that, you know. So I make a point to I wished I had asked more questions to those people, you know. I missed an opportunity. But in the latter years of my mother, Jean and I would go over there and we would ask her, and we tape recorded her stories, and she would tell us some old stories, you know, and how she would interpret for people, you know, and some of the things. Then I remember my grandfather talking about some old medicine men and what they did, and how some of the things that they did in healing people and doing some strange, unusual things. So those things, I was fortunate to listen to those stories, but I regret that I didn't ask more questions. I just regret it, you know, and until it was too late. It was too late, you know. I lost my grandfather in about '68, and then my Aunt Laura died and then all those old women also all started passing away. But they, you know, and they all spoke Cheyenne. My mother's could speak Cheyenne, Arapaho, Sioux, English, and Mexican. She had a 5th grade education. They her parents wouldn't put her in because they didn't want her going to the boarding school and being taken away. So they just kept her. Yeah. And they rather than when they were down here, when there was taking all these children, they went to South Dakota and stayed up there for a couple of years, you know, and then came back. Yeah. So they wouldn't put their children in those boarding schools. So.
Wow. Yeah. I to the point of recording conversations, I interviewed my granddad 2 years ago, just to have it, you know, because it's, you know, just, and also for, you know, and thankfully he's still here and they're back in Wales, but, you know, just to, whenever time comes and it's, you know, it's his time and we get to remember him through his voice and like that's special. Hearing someone's voice after they passed, I think is something that's, you know, to have that and to do it with all family members, because those stories, they're going to get lost, right? And they just, you know, we keep them going, right, by telling those stories. But if you have them documented and through their own words,
my mother has told a whole bunch of stories, and they're all at Oklahoma History Center. So you can get those. And Smithsonian would come to the house, and they would interview all those old ladies and my grandpa. And so I can go to the Smithsonian and click on it and hear him talking. Wow. And hear him singing. My grandfather had a great voice. He could really sing, and I was told that a lot of the songs that would have been lost if he hadn't taught them to the people. He said some of them old songs are 200 and 300 years old, you know, if not older, and he had all of those songs, what they call a startup song, and Grandpa knew all those songs, and those old singers, he taught them all those songs, and they passed it on. Yeah. So it's I had an interesting childhood growing up, you know, and with I remember my sisters told us one time, she told Aunt Laura, they told Aunt Laura, I said, how come you treat them boys better than us? You treat them boys better than you treat us. And Aunt Laura, bird woman, said, they're going to have to die for you someday. Said those boys are going to have to die for you one day, protecting the village. And you know, she said, and they're going to give their lives up for you. She said, that's why we treat those boys like that, because we know that they're going to die. That's how all them old women had no husbands, because they were all killed in the 1870s, 1880s, you know. Yeah. And some of them never married again, you know. And so that was, and then they would tell us, keep your shoes right by the bed. Keep your shoes by the bed. You might have to get up and run. And I thought, why would I have to get up and run? Then as I got older, I realized that you would have to get up and run because that's what they did when they were attacked, or in the early mornings, or they would have to get up and run. At Cheyenne, Washita, that's what they did. They had to jump and run in the snow barefoot. And I did a painting, and it's going to be on display at this art show here that of two young teenage girls running through the snow with a army guy riding up on them on a horse with his carbine, and he's looking at them, and they just slaughtered those women and children, and some of the older men. They just slaughtered them all, and he just looked at him, and he turned his horse away and rode away. Didn't harm them. They were 14-year-old girls. 14-year-old girls. Moving Behind and Cornstalk were their names, if I remember correctly. And I heard that story about that. And 10 years after that fight, they had a reunion of that. And that soldier came back, and he met them two girls again after 10 years, after they'd already killed a bunch of them. And this guy had compassion on them two little girls and let them go.
Yeah.
So I painted that, and I called it Crimson Dawn. Uh-huh. You can see smoke in the background and fire in the background, these two little girls running away, and this guy riding up. It's upstairs, and it'll be on exhibit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that exhibit, it's going to be, because there's 4 or 5 of you artists, I believe, right? That's kind of curating it and coming together to tell the story. And that's the beauty, I think, of what you're doing now is, after retiring, right? You don't have to paint people no more. I mean, you still do, but you get to tell these incredible stories and the history through your painting, which is really cool to do and really great. It's kind of like your service, I guess, back to whoever that wants to learn about this, is recreating that scene through your artwork. And obviously, you gone on and worked for 50 years and did fantastic work, for OSBI and the law enforcement. But, I love the side of you that's doing this work that, with the passion that you have, because obviously, putting criminals away is a great thing to do. But just from hearing you talk, your passion is telling Native American history, telling your history. Obviously you were very good at your job and did amazing things, and that's why you have great recognition. But the art side, probably the artist in you is like, I want to paint my history, my heritage, and tell my stories.
Well, that's true. That's how.
Right?
I came downstairs this morning, and and I started painting. Started trying to finish a painting, and that's how come I got paint on my hand. I didn't even think.
I love it. So I'm glad you showed up with paint on your hand, because that's a sign of a true. It's just everyone I know who's an artist always has paint on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mike Larson I'd go over see him, he'd just be covered in paint. Just paint all over his hands and on his clothes, and his apron is just had a splash of color on it everywhere, because and I'd say, what are you doing? He said, I'm painting, Harvey, I'm painting. He said, that's what I do every day, I paint. I said, all right.
Master of your craft, right? I mean, if you love what you do, you've got to do it every day, and it doesn't feel like work. But you also, that's why if you're a painter, if you're a musician, if you like to play golf like me, the more you play, the better you're going to get at it.
Yeah.
Right? The more you do it. So.
I was lost this past year. I fell off the tractor. I slipped off the tractor, and I jammed my hand into that steel deck, and I tore the tendons in these 3 fingers when I hit.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't hold a paintbrush for 8 months. I couldn't even write my name, and that was terrible.
Yeah,
it was terrible that I couldn't even, because I tried to in my hand, I couldn't hold it. And but it finally healed up. I could close my hand.
Yeah,
and I started painting again. And I had such satisfaction. I felt lost for 8 months. Because I couldn't do that. Yeah. So it's
Gina, how was he for those 8 months?
He's a little lost.
A little lost. It's hard work for 8 months. Yeah. It's not. Yeah, because you've lost your part of you, right? Like that's what you do every day. If someone you can't paint anymore, it's like, I mean, what am I going to do all day?
Frustrating. It was really frustrating. I guess it was a good thing it came during the pandemic when we went also, and we kind of had a lull, but I went to the doctor because I was so concerned about it. I thought I broke something, and he said he took a tuning fork and he tapped it, got it vibrated, and he put it on my hand. He said, "Does that hurt?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you didn't break anything then." He said, "Because if you had fractured one of those bones," he said, "that hurt like hell."
Yeah.
that vibration that would have went into that. I said, well, damn, why'd you do that? He said, well, it's a lot easier than sending you in there and having an X-ray taken. He said, we got it done. He said, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have hurt so much. All those little bones in your fingers. If you'd have broken something, that would have been awful.
Yeah, it was all black and blue. My fingers were all bruised up, and you know, I've had a great career. I've got good kids. My kids are all, you know, you worry about your children, and but for the most part, you know, my kids are all professionals doing something, you know, and I don't worry about them.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not stressed out about them, and I think that's a blessing. And when you have to worry about your children, I know so many guys that worry about their kids because they're on the wrong way, going the wrong way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Coming up to modern day, present day, you have a book, right? Tell me about the book and what you're doing recently. You know, spreading some love about the book. I know you signed some this morning. What's the book about?
The book is it's called The Children of White Thunder.
Okay.
And it starts in 1830 up to the present time. And it talks about White Thunder as an arrow keeper. He's a priest, and what he did, and it moves into his daughter, Oklahoman, who's a mountain in Colorado is named after her now. It used to be Squaw Mountain, and they took the squaw out and called it Oklahoman. That's my great grandma.
Wow.
And and she married William Bent. William Bent is an Englishman. Him and his brother opened up the Santa Fe Trail, going to Santa Fe, and they built a big fort in southeast Colorado. And Charles Bent went on into Colorado and became the first territorial governor of New Mexico.
Okay.
And he got killed there. And then my great-grandfather, Edmund Garrier, was a scout and an interpreter, and he went to school at St. Mary's in Kansas, and because his dad sent him there, even though he's half Cheyenne and half French, and he had become educated. He went to college, and he came back. He left there and came back and lived with the family, moved back into the Cheyennes and lived with the Cheyennes. In a little town out here, Gary, Oklahoma, is named after him.
Yeah.
And he had a trading post there in Gary, and he married Edmund. His son was my grandfather, my mother's father, and so he's the one that taught us a whole bunch of things, taught us a lot of stuff. He always used to say, "One day you'll know." You know, we said, "Well, tell me how that happened." "Well, just pay attention. One day you'll know." And he said, it's important. He said, for you to discover it yourself instead of have someone tell you. So you discover it. He said, it'll be yours. It'll be yours. And if someone tells you, he said, you may just forget it. He said, but if you learn it, he said. So I said, how did you know that turtle was there in that water? The sand turtle. How did you know that turtle? He said, well, one day you'll know. So he'd tell us those kind of things, show us, and he'd make bows for us. And so he married a Sioux woman, a lady by the name of Nellie Adams, and she rode in Buffalo Bill's Western show as a trick rider on horseback. She'd run and jump off of horses and flip around, do all, she's a trick rider. My grandpa saw her, and he said, I'm gonna marry her. And so they went back up there, and he found her, and he married her, and they brought her back down here. So then my mother was Anna Garrier, and she was her grandma Julia was one of the Bent girls, Julia, and so she spoke nothing but Cheyenne language till she was 10 or 12 years old. Her Julia was at Sand Creek, and my grandpa Edmund was at Sand Creek. They survived that battle in Sand Creek, in Colorado, where they slaughtered all those Indians up there. But they were survivors. And Julia never spoke English. She was so mad, she would never speak English. She always spoke Indian. So my mother grew up that way, and she learned all these different languages, you know. And I experienced that one time when I was a little boy. I watched one of my uncles and a Cheyenne man and a Comanche man. And rather than talking Comanche or Cheyenne or English, they talked to each other in Mexican. They spoke Mexican. And I thought, what are they doing? Why are they doing that, you know? So later on, I realized that tribal people spoke their own tribal language, and then when they met other tribes, they spoke in sign language, you know? They spoke in sign language, and so that's how the Plains people communicated with other tribes, either through sign language, and then when they had allies, then they learned how to speak Arapaho, and they learned how to speak Sioux, and then the fourth language they learned was Mexican, because there was the influence of the Mexicans coming up, and so they all learned how to speak Mexican, because that's how they communicated with those cowboys and Mexican people. Half the Mexican people were in this part of the country, and the Indians took them as captives. You know, so you have a lot of Mexican influence in the tribes, that are not. People say that they're full blood or something. Probably not, you know, because they took so many captives during the wars. They were losing so many men that they had to replenish. So they took captives, took little white captives, Mexican captives from other tribes, and incorporated them into their tribe. And so they married into the tribe. And so you have a lot of tribes in this state that have Mexican names.
Yeah.
So that's it's interesting, you know. So, and when I said that, my mother learned all those languages, you know, because that's what they did. And those two guys spoke in Mexican to one another rather than English. They were older men, you know. If they're alive today, they'd be over 100 years old.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, to observe those kind of things and see how it progressed. And I'm fortunate enough to have seen those things, and fortunate enough to experienced a lot of ceremonies, you know. I've been with a lot of different tribes and a lot of different ceremonies, and that's how I came up with the idea of the National Memorial. You know, was that rather than making a statue, I wanted a place where people could come and do a ceremony, you know, and be part of a ceremony. So I incorporated the water and the air and the fire and the earth. And I incorporated the directions, and I incorporated the cardinal points and the sacred colors, you know. And then I put eagle feathers on it, you know, and I put lance, and all things that people could relate to. And I did. We called it the Red Road, but some northern California tribes said we don't have a Red Road. I said, well, we'll call it the Path of Life. I said, it's how you live when you walk. It's how you live, and you try to stay on the path, and you might vary off, you know, and drift away, you know, and then but you get pulled back. So you try to stay on that path of harmony, you know. And so and I said, I want to put a path of harmony, and then the harmony leads you into that circle, and once you get inside that circle, then you're in harmony with all these things, with the sacred colors. And I put prayer cloths in there. And people can tie prayer cloths. We got a prayer cloth tree. We tie. If someone says, "Hey, pray for me," I go out and we'll take a ribbon and pray on it and tie it in the tree. And every time the wind blows, that prayer goes out. So our tree's just full of those. And we did that at Bear Butte too. Was sacred mountain to the Cheyennes and the Sioux. So, you know, those kind of things that you live in a ceremony, and that's what I incorporated in, and that's how come all those different tribes for 2 years, you know, when they put out some guidelines, and I didn't even read the guidelines. I just put all that stuff in there. And then once I realized that I was one of the finalists, then I looked at it and I saw all these incorporations of what it was supposed to do. And it was supposed to be a place. And they wanted me to put an entry and an exit to it. I wouldn't do it. I said, I'm not having people take a shortcut through our dedication and our memorial, going someplace else. I said, I want one entryway and one, and it's just in and out. You have to want to go there. I said, and it's not where you're going somewhere else. It's destination. I want it to be a destination, and that's what we did, you know. And they said, okay. I said, no, they were pretty good about keeping the idea, our concept, Gene and I's concept. We kept that concept, and we kind of shifted some things around and made things a little better. And you know, we some things that I wasn't even. Didn't even think about. Example, they want to know what kind of fire I wanted. I said, a hot fire, man.
Fire.
But they said, no, what color?
Yeah.
What color do you want it to be? You want it to be blue, white, red, mixed, oranges? I said, yeah, I'll make it look like a campfire. And then I said, I want it to be eternal. They said, no, you can't have an eternal fire there because you're in the wood, you're in the trees there. You're right across from, and they have some eternal fires there, but they're in big pools of water, great big pools of water. And so we had, it was just, we kept true to the concept, but we changed some things and moved some things around. And so it's been a good ride.
Yeah.
A good ride for us. We've really enjoyed it. Gene and I've really had it.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the last few years for you, obviously, you know, you have the Warrior Circle of Honor, right, is what it's called. Yeah, titled that. And for people listening, I'll put a link to it so you can go and check it out. Obviously, that was unveiled in 2020, and then last year you get the call that you're going to be inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. Just to add on, you know, like, well, how was that experience?
You know, it's I'm amazed at, you know, they inducted me into the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation's Hall of Fame, and then they inducted me into the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Hall of Fame, and then into the Oklahoma Military Hall of Fame, and over 10 years, you know, those things just happened, and then the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, and then I was an Oklahoma Ambassador of Creativity. I've been chairman of various national organizations, and I'm the chairman of the Indian Arts and Craft Board for the Department of Interior now, currently, and then they moved us to they put a part of the 250th anniversary of the United States. So we sit on that committee, and then we sit on the committee for the Cold War Memorial. So Gina's just trying to quit talking about yourself.
You got so much stuff going on. Hey, people listening to you talk. They ain't listening to me. They get to listen to me all the time. Don't worry about me. But it's fascinating that you know, like you said, all of these things happen. You know, and obviously it's a product of you being very good at what you do and the service that you've given back to to people, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's through art and creativity. You know, it's fascinating stuff. But one of the cool things is, you know, I was at that ceremony last year, you know, and seeing so many people in the room, and you know, you going up there and you receive your medallion, and you're around these incredible group of people. You know, Justice Cargill was one of those people, and I'm going to interview her, I think, in a couple of weeks, and you know, you have all these people around, and it must be really cool to be on stage and just honored by not only the entire state, but just everyone in a room, and have that ceremony go on, and have family there, and those get to experience it as well. Yeah,
I was glad for my kids. You know, I was glad for my kids, and one of my boys told me, he said, "Damn, Dad," he said, "you're a hard act to follow." He said, "You're a hard act." He said, "You realize you're a hard act to follow?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, just try. Just try to be as good as you can. Do what you do." And they're all gifted. All of my children are pretty gifted about things. You know, some artists, and so.
Yeah, well, you're just setting an example, right? You're just setting an example like your uncle did for you, and like many other figures in your life have done. It's setting that example that, you know, we should work to, you know, be the best that we can be and help others.
Yeah. Follow your own choice, your own goals. I said, you don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, I had two of my boys. I got into law enforcement, then they realized it's not for them, Dad, not for me. You know, they said it's just not for me.
Yeah.
You know, so
But at least they know that, right? At least they figured that out. That's one of the things I like to talk about is, people, we go through life and we might regret not trying something, and people think, well, what if it doesn't work out? Well, so what? At least you know that wasn't for me. You're never going to think about, oh, I should have tried this or I should have tried that. Give it a try, and if you like it, great. If you don't, try something else.
Yeah, that's that's exactly true. We're not afraid to step out.
Yeah,
we're not afraid to try it and decide for yourself. And so we all do that. I've had so many failures in my life. But I always tell the boys, I said, success is built on failure. I said, you learn from those things, and if you can't quit, you learn. You just don't quit. Just keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. Finishing up, then, what are you excited about this fall? What do you have coming up that you're kind of really enjoying, and what are you painting at the moment?
I'm painting my wife.
Oh, really? Nice. Is that a personal project, or is it just one that is this going to go into a museum or a gallery somewhere, or just something to?
I'm probably going to hang it on the wall at the house.
Yeah, keep it at the house,
and then have it digitized and put a copy in a gallery or something.
Saw prints.
Gina, my mother gave Gina her name. She said, called her Hodokehe, means star woman.
Okay.
He said, she came from the stars for you, Harvey. And my mother did not like a lot of my brother's wives. But she loved Gina.
You passed. You passed the test.
She loved Gina. And so, the star woman, and she said, she came from the stars for you.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing a painting of her.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's
what the paint is?
That's what this paint is right here. When I got
Yeah.
And we have the dedication coming up. Dedication's coming up.
Yeah, the dedication's coming up in November.
Okay.
In Washington.
Yeah.
And they're expecting between 30 and 40,000 Indians to show up.
Wow.
Veterans and veterans' families. And different tribes are sending whole delegations of people. Cheyenne and Arapahos are sending about 200 people. Tribes are going to pay for them. Send them up there for about 5 days.
That's amazing.
Up there. And a lot of tribes are sending people, and so it's veterans, almost every tribe has a memorial for their veterans. Yeah, there's just a memorial for their veterans, something. So it's just,
that's huge.
Yeah. They like their veterans, they like their warriors, men and women. We have a lot of women, lots of women that are veterans.
That's
Indian people, percentage-wise, 30-some% of tribes have veterans. 30%, and compared to less than Indians have more per cap than anybody else. Before whites, blacks, Mexicans, Asians, Indians put more people on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And I heard a story while I was in Washington that a guy told his son, he said, well, if you're going to go in the military, he said, when you get in there, he said, you attach yourself to an Indian, he'll bring you home. See, Cheyenne Arapahos did not have any fatalities in Vietnam, and they had no fatalities, and they say that's because of the medicine and the prayers that they had to protect those men. They had some guys wounded, but nobody died there. And they put a lot of Indians in Vietnam in battle.
Yeah.
And no fatalities among the Southern Cheyenne and Southern Arapahos.
That's an amazing stat.
It is, for a fact.
Because people went to Vietnam and they didn't come home.
Yeah.
Right?
56,000 of them didn't come home.
Wow.
And no fatalities among the Cheyenne Arapahos, Southern Cheyenne Arapahos. It's pretty phenomenal, because in my little platoon, we had a lot of guys wounded and some guys killed. I thought there were a lot more killed, but we went to the wall and we looked up all their names, and I said, well, he made it. Man, that guy got shot 5 times. I said, and he made it.
Yeah.
So.
There's something about it, right?
Yeah, there's
that heritage, that history, that warrior mentality, the way that you're brought up, totally different to others, and you're not just getting in the military because it's a job, and you're not being sent somewhere because you're a warrior.
Yeah, and that's the way you know. When I think about that, I think about what my Aunt Laura said. They're going to die for you someday.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to die for you someday. That's why we treat them that way. We don't spank them. We don't hit them. You know, you never saw that from those old people. You see it now, you know, because there's among younger people that mistreat their children or leave them, you know. But in those days, you didn't do that thing. I never got a whipping. Growing up. Probably should have, but I didn't.
Right. Yeah. Gina's laughing over here thinking, as multiple times you should have. I would love to just hit you across the head sometimes. We'll see. Yeah. Never got one growing up, but I'm sure you might have had plenty since. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming down.
Well, thanks. Obviously, you made it very easy. I was just very
You're extremely busy, and I appreciate Gina for fitting you in our schedule and figuring this out. It's been an absolute blast to chat to you, to share your story. I know there's a lot more, and hopefully we'll get to share some more stories one day. But I wish you safe travels for the dedication, all the other stuff that you guys are doing. And for people listening, go to the website if you're interested in hearing more about Harvey or buying some of his work. It's harveypratt.com, and I'll put the link in the description. And we will catch you next episode. Cheers.
All right. Thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And finally, our third sponsor for today, the Oklahoma 988 Mental Health Lifeline. 988 is the direct 3-digit lifeline that connects you with the trained behavioral health professionals that can get all Oklahomans the help that they need. Learn more by visiting 988oklahoma.com. It's 988oklahoma.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.